Greetings. Welcome to the Asana Kitchen podcast. I'm David Garrigues. And before we get started, just want to let you know about my upcoming course that I have. It's called Practical Practice Talks. So it's a series of talks on Sundays from March 7th to May 9th from 10 a.m. at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So you can attend it live or watch a recording. And so the idea is for one, to draw on my own practical 30 years plus of practice of like what works for me and what kind of common problems come up and how do I solve them. And there's such themes as like how to breathe better is one title. So we'll go all into the practicalities of the breath and like when to modify or to use props and how to master a series and how to master a pose. Okay, and I will also open the door to you to write to me during the week before with your own questions about the upcoming talk, and I will try to incorporate those your practical concerns into my talk. So the idea is that you get some real practical input into your practice. Okay, and so you can find out about that at my website, davidgarrigues.com. It's $115, and I hope you decide to join me. Okay, so today's, or this month's theme is faith. Okay, and what I have to, I'm going to kind of go in a little journey of faith in practice with you. And I would say for me, I feel like that faith is the number one motivator when it comes down to it. That of all the things that keep getting me onto my mat, it's this, this idea of devotion and trust in the ultimate benefit of practice. Okay, but what's curious about it is that faith is elusive. It's very, even after 30 years of practice, it's still something I battle with, battle to have like a strong faith. And so, and it's not something you either have or don't have. It's something that you're kind of continually cultivating or building or working to express. And to me, the success of your ability to build faith determines the success of you getting on your mat and doing that daily discipline. Okay, and so I'm just going to start off by so in the dictionary, faith is, in one sense, it's just trust. That's one of the definitions of faith, trust, but more kind of specifically, it's also a strong belief in God or the doctrines of a religion, and that strong belief is based on kind of a spiritual apprehension or spiritual understanding rather than proof. And so, and in the Bible, they have this definition of faith. It comes from Hebrew 1:11, and it says, "Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for." So the assurance of things hoped for, and also the conviction of things not seen. Okay, and this is a really important part of faith, is that so rather than proof, like you can get in this visible world, faith is pertaining to the invisible realm or the spiritual realm that's intangible and ultimately not provable empirically. And this is one of the challenges of faith. And so it says and then further after it says that faith is the assurance of things hoped for and the conviction of things not seen. By faith, we understand that the world was created by the Word of God, so that what is seen, so all of this that we see, that we sense with our senses, The material world was not made out of things that are visible. Okay, so there's a invisible, sacred source to everything, and in that way, then you're in a meaningful universe. And so all of your actions, they have a context. And in yoga, we call it karma, meaning that there's cause and effect, and that when you act, there's consequences from that act in a kind of very global, universal way. So there's a cosmic justice, and which is very different than if you just are randomly placed here in a kind of meaningless physical world, and where your actions really only matter in terms of, like, you don't necessarily, right, that the consequence of your action in a human sense, you might be subject to human justice, or you might not, depending on the circumstances, right? And yet in a cosmic sense, every action is accounted for. And so the universe then is one cohesive whole, of which everything in it is an inextricable part, including us. And yet our consciousness and our ego is able to, it's one of the, you could say, shadow aspects of being conscious, is that we can feel separate from, or alienated, and like not part of this, even though that, from the spiritual perspective, that's an impossibility. And so every action that we take affects the entirety, because we are part of the entirety. And so that, but, and this is, it gets very large very fast, but it's also, it applies to the very smallest things that we do in practice, all the way to the largest. And so in this very basic way, we need to have faith that the practice is doing something good for us. Okay, so it is darned challenging to have to be established in a discipline, a daily thing where we set aside time every day to do this very hard thing, physically hard, mentally hard, and so to dedicate your life to that, it means you've got to think that this is going to benefit me. This is benefiting me, and so. And to me, I break those benefits down into three possibilities. Okay, and my feeling is you need all three possibilities. And first is just physical. Okay, so we do the hatha yoga to have a healthy body, to move better and to feel better in our bodies, to be stronger and more flexible. Okay, and so partly then faith that us practicing gives us that health, right? Physical well-being. And then the second is mental well-being. Okay, so that the yoga is a science of the mind, and it's a kind of, you can say that it's a deep study of, or like even yoga is kind of a manual to how to operate your mind, and how to avoid many of the pitfalls of the mind, and so the mind can cause it. There's an amazing book called Mind as Healer, Mind as Slayer. Okay? And so the way that we think and the way that we perceive can deeply influence our happiness and our sense of peace and what we're doing here. And so, and yoga helps you to study the mind and to learn to operate it, basically. So you do yoga simply to get some control over your mind. And even if it just means to focus more and to be able to sustain yourself in the present moment and not get distracted. Okay, and so that's one of the things you're expecting when you practice every day. And so faith is partly trust that your practice is going to deliver that. Okay, and then last is the more bigger one that like the dictionary is saying. So it's this belief in God based on a spiritual understanding. So kind of this intuitive, deep internal experience of the sacred dimension of your life, and rather than proof. Okay, and so all of these things play into faith. And the word in Sanskrit is Shraddha, and it means faith or trust. And so, see, there's a few things about this. Okay, so one is I want to go back to that dictionary definition for a minute. So it has two tricky words in it. One is strong belief. Okay, so there's a belief in God, and then rather than proof. Okay, and so, see, and this is, so now I want to talk to you about that, but I also want to enter this one other point in it. In the fact that you can't get empirical proof of God, right, and the existence of that you live in a meaningful universe, right? It means in Christianity, they actually call it the venture of faith. Okay, so that to have faith it requires a venture or an adventure. Okay, it's like a leaping off into the unknown. You can't have a certainty about it because it's not empirical. It's not. Faith doesn't work like you understanding the spiritual dimension of your life and life itself isn't as easy as 2 + 2 = 4. Okay, and in fact, in Indian mythology, they make a big point out of emphasizing that though there is cosmic justice in the world, right, that this is all operating under, that every action has its fitting consequence, that you can never, you cannot always see that working. Okay, and we know that. When you look around the world, you see that you can see that there's injustice, there's corruption, there's violence, there's all these systemic and chronic ongoing problems that, right? We don't live in an idyllic world where you get 100% assurance that there is this spiritual dimension. You see, and so it actually works even more like this in practice, because what's really strange is if you notice what happens, we often don't even get proof of the physical benefit of practice or the mental benefit, right? That often when we practice, we actually hurt ourselves, right? And we're constantly kind of dodging pains and strains and encountering these physical hardships that constantly call into question, is this really good for me? Like doing this? Because my back hurts or my knee is hurting, and right, and so and mentally too. Like when we practice, like the very process of practicing, it doesn't immediately bring up well-being for us. In fact, quite the opposite a lot of the time. Like afflictions come up. Like what we see is our anger and our envy and our jealousy and our inadequacy, and so much anguish is coming when we practice. And so here we are then, returning day after day. And it takes this, this belief in, without this kind of rational step-by-step proof day to day. It's a venture of faith, and venture means a risky or daring journey or undertaking. Okay, and it says to dare to do something or go somewhere that might be unpleasant or dangerous. You see, and the curious thing about this idea is that you could say the venture of life. Okay, so that life itself is a venture. It's a risky or daring journey or undertaking, and it can be unpleasant or dangerous. Okay, then there's no escaping that. It's amazing what a predicament a living being has being in this world, right? That incredible minefield of obstacles that you deal with from birth to death, right? Just as a part of being alive, and amidst this constant change and this constant need to adapt and grow and keep working to be strong and find balance amongst this kind of amazing situation we find ourselves in, right? And so faith is a little bit, it's like a conscious stance towards all the uncertainty or the venture of life. It's like to say that there's meaning behind it, and that I'm on this kind of spiritual journey. And so that, like, to choose not to say, even from a physical standpoint, so to choose not to exercise is its own risk, right? And you can see that our own country is a kind of model in the unsuccessful results of that we are 2/3 obese. You've got hospitals full of all kinds of diseases that are related to lifestyle, to diet and inactivity and things. And so yes, when we go into yoga, there's physical danger when you're working to stretch your hamstrings and bend your back and do lotus and these things. And then also, it's a curious thing about our nature, that when we turn our attention and our energy to something, we tend to make a mess of it just by the nature of getting into it, right? So we kind of apply our flawed methodology, our flawed intentions, and our flawed desires, and things don't turn out perfectly, right? We make mistakes along the way that test our faith. Okay, but ultimately, to keep practicing, the faith element has to win out. Like, we have to keep building trust in the things that we're doing, and then backing up our actions to so that what we are doing is worthy of trust. Whew. Okay, so I'm going to read you a few poems that kind of speak to some of these themes that I'm talking to you about, and I'm just trying to get you to acknowledge how fascinating a study of faith is, and how necessary it is, of your faith, like what you're putting your trust in, and also your struggles with faith. Okay, that is so key. And so I'm going to read you a couple of poems from one of my favorite. So there's a group of gypsy wandering musician bards that travel around India, and they're called the Balls. And this is from an anthology of poetry, and I love this one poet in there that really speaks to me. And one of the things he says is, so I, and this is speaking to both I love this because he singles out faith as a prize. It's like something very desirable that you want, but that's also very hard to come by. So he says, I plunged into the water like a fisherman, hoping to catch the fish of faith. So I plunged into the water like a fisherman, hoping to catch the fish of faith. And to me, this is what you do on your mat. Getting on your mat is like plunging into the waters like a fisherman. And you are trying to catch the fish of faith. That's what you're doing every day. You're trying to trust in yourself and your method and what your method is leading to. And so he says, and devotion, which was my fishing net, got torn to pieces. Oh, so devotion got torn to pieces when I dove in. I got on my mat. And this is what I'm saying. We counter so many struggles, so many things that are the opposite of proof, things that seem to contradict what we're trying to build faith in, right? And so let me just read you that line. So he said, I plunged into the water like a fisherman, hoping to catch the fish of faith. Devotion, which was my fishing net, got torn to pieces. And I only gathered some useless shells, jealousies and blames, churning the mud in vain. Yeah. See, this is not an easy thing we're doing. Okay? And so when we get on that mat, so many times we dredge up jealousies and blames and aggression and exactly the opposite of we want, churning in the mud in vain. And that's the end of that poem. And so to me, luckily there's a few poems by this same poet, and so I know that this was just one of his modes, right? This was just one day or, a theme. It's not like the only thing. It's not like every time you fish, your net gets, your devotion net gets torn up. But some days it does, and you've got to be able to roll with that. Okay, and so another poem by the same man, he goes, look for him in the temple of your limbs. And look for this invisible source. It's her, the friend. Look for the friend. Look for the guest. Look for the self. In the temple of your limbs. Exactly what you do when you do your asanas. So she is there as the Lord of the world, speaking, singing in enchanting tunes. And she's an expert in hide and seek. Hide and seek, right? So that's what faith is. It's a venture. It's like it's belief in something invisible, things that you conviction of things not seen, and there you are trying to see the thread of your life, like get to the pith and the kind of what am I doing here on this planet? Who am I? And what's the real thrust of my life? And it's hide and seek. Some you see, you get glimpses, and then you get holes in your net, and you dredge up useless shells. And then he says, no one can see him. She is the universe with no form of her own, right? She, the friend is the universe itself but yet with no form. And that's speaking to the grand interconnectedness of all things, which everyone is a part, okay, we are part of. And so when we feel alienated, when we feel separated from it, then this is an affliction. Okay, this isn't the real state of things. Okay, and then it says, then the poet switches over to talking to his heart. Do not try to catch the friend, oh my heart, because it can never be caught. And here's the last line. You can only hope for her in whole faith. You can only hope for her in whole faith. Okay, and so the word Shraddha, it has these words with it too, that I will tell you, that it's reverence, respect, it's loyalty, longing for, intimacy, curiosity, to approve of or to assent to. Okay, so in this venture of faith, you have to build it. Okay, and so loyalty, like you have to be loyal. And listen to the definition of loyalty. It's a strong feeling of support, or giving or showing firm and constant support or allegiance to a person or institution. Okay, and so you're loyal to your practice. And loyal means you show up every day, and through the challenging times, through the good times, right? And you build an allegiance to that. And then also you build an allegiance to the idea of a spiritual dimension to your life. Okay, and then and that is faith. Okay, the very making an allegiance itself is faith, whether it's successful or not, right? And the longing for, I love that idea, that just the yearning to know or to connect is its own form of faith. It's not to connect. It's not to know for sure that there's this spiritual dimension. It's just to long for that, right? And intimacy and curiosity, those two kind of go together, that just to wonder about it and to spend so much time curiously inquiring in your practice. This is faith. Okay, and also, so I want to bring this up to you, that it's funny, in the Christian sense, they have this word that you hear, and that really actually turns me off, but it's got this truth to it, and in the Hindu way of putting it, resonates with me more. But it potentially is pointing to the same thing. And in Christianity, they call it like God's plan for you, right? So when you come out of this womb, you're not a clean slate, right? And you're not just orphaned. And there's a beautiful Kabir poem where he addresses that. He says, I talk to my inner lover and I say, why such rush? We sense that there's some sort of spirit that loves the birds and animals and the ants, and perhaps the same one that gave radiance to you in your mother's womb. And then he says, is it logical that you would be walking around entirely orphaned now? See, and this is the crux of faith to me. It's one of the hardest parts, is to think that it's called dharma in the Hindu world. It's like you have, and James Hillman, he calls it a calling, and he calls it the innate image of the self, and an acorn theory. Like each person is born with the kind of blueprint, like the acorn within that little tiny nut is the blueprint for the entire massive oak tree. Okay, and this is the true of us, that we're born not as a clean slate, but with certain, like our whole equipment, the bodies we've been given, these hands, these feet, this flexibility, this spinal column, these senses, these very eyes that perceive in this unique way, this mind that processes information in this way, and even this individual sense of I-ness, and my voice, everything was given to me, not randomly and not meaninglessly, but very purposefully, like that I have a dharma or some kind of calling, some kind of specific sacred work to do, some kind of contribution to make in the world. And this is where he's saying, is it logical that you would be walking around entirely orphaned now? No, and then the next line he says, no, the truth is you turned away yourself and decided to go into the dark alone. You see, and this is what each of us does. It's funny how faith is so elusive. And it's one of the reasons I love that poem and the man being so in touch with himself where he goes, I dove in to catch the prize of faith and the net of devotion was torn to pieces. You see, because he says, so Kabir, he says, the truth is you turned away yourself and decided to go into the dark alone. And now you're tangled up in others and have forgotten what you once knew. And that is why everything you do has some weird failure in it. You see, and this is the thing, is we practice and we take these potentially very wholesome things like Surya Namaskara and standing poses and these asana forms that have the potential to be sacred and healing, and we sort of get our ego involved and we get our fears and our aberrant desires, and we start pursuing the wrong goals, and we create these weird failures, physically, mentally, and so to get in touch with that, and this is why I love that idea of curiosity and longing. It gives you this very active way of building faith amidst your failures and your all the shortcomings that we bring to the table just by being the flawed human beings that we are. Woo, so beautiful. I just love that. Love the themes. Okay, and so to get on your mat, then you've got to like kind of set up this proposition that you're living a purposeful life of some kind, right? That somehow there's an image of self, some kind of vision of your life well lived. And this is something you build throughout your life, that things occur to you from within, listening, and you're not orphaned, that the greater self that you are, so because we're all this entirety. So we're this little tiny representation of the entirety, and we are the entirety itself. Okay, and so we're trying to see. We're this one little piece of the entirety, trying to see the entirety, and so we kind of we live out our purpose by acting, by our practicing with devotion and getting strong, getting control of our bodies and minds so that we can direct our choices into avenues of our choosing and then bear fruit. Okay, but at the same time, we practice to learn to listen, to become receptive, and to be directed by greater forces than ourselves that are invisible, right? And these are both aspects of faith. Okay, and a couple of things. I'm going to read you a couple more poems. And one is by this very beautiful saintly man that lived in India, and his name was Swami Ram Dass. And it's not the Ram Dass of the West that you might be more familiar with. This man lived in an ashram the very eastern part of Karnataka, the state where Mysore is. And I've been to his ashram before, and one of the things they do there is they chant the name of Ram 24 hours a day. So they have these two shrines where people, it actually isn't 24. It's from like 5 a.m. to 7 p.m. They keep it going in a whole round. I mean, all the time they're chanting the mantra, and so I love this poem that this man wrote, and he was the founder of that ashram, and he wrote poems. And one he said is, "I am the spark away from the fire. I am the drop strayed from the sea. I am the leaf estranged from the tree." Okay, so I'm the spark that went away, that sprung away from the fire. I'm the drop that strayed from the sea. I'm the leaf estranged from the tree. And then but I long for the fire. I stretch for the sea. I aim to rejoin the tree. So, and I come from the infinite, which is this entirety. It's part of the invisible, unnameable spiritual dimension. Is I come from the infinite. Infinite is my home, and I go back there, and I become the infinite. And so it's kind of the ultimate thing. And that's that Kabir poem of like, the fact is we turn away ourselves. We branch off. We're the spark that branches off from the fire. But then we also work to return. And then another poem I want to share with you is from Tulsidas, who was another devotee of Ram. And I just love this one. And so first he's talking to Ram himself. He's like kind of speaking out to the heavens, talking to Ram, but he's talking to people too. And he goes, "Who aside from you, King Ram, is my true patron?" Right? The worthy of my desire, my highest aspiration. Who aside from you is my true patron? No one. Okay, so of all the possible things you could be devoted to, no one is my true patron but Ram. And then he goes, "I've thought it out, and I will tell it to all, including you, Ram, my master. If anyone knows anyone more special than you, let him lay it on the line." He comes out with it, let him lay it on the line. See, and this is what I love about this poem. This man, he's ready to lay it on the line. He's thought it out, and he'll tell it to all, boldly. Love that. And then there's another poem by the same man that's very, very telling. Okay, and it's like, to me, it's like overcoming the odds of like how challenging it is to accept the venture of faith and kind of overcome your limits to win through to this, to where you can boldly proclaim. I say almost started to complain. That was a funny slip, huh? No, so boldly claim. I've thought it out. I'll tell it to all. Who's more special than this ultimate self? And so he goes, so Tulsidas, he says, "I was born in a beggar family, and hearing the sounds of celebration, my mother and father felt anguish, felt pain," right? Because they were so poor, they couldn't even have celebrations, right? "And from childhood on, poor thing that I went weeping, begging from door to door. And to me, the four great goals of life, just the basic stuff that we all pursue in life. happiness and well-being and wealth and family and such. To me, the four great goals of life were 4 little grains of food. So destitute, right? And then he said, and that is the Tulsi who has become the good servant of the worthy Lord. That is the Tulsi, that lowly beggar who was thinking about 4 grains of food. That is the Tulsi who became the good servant of that worthy Lord. And then it says, when fate, the great astrologer, hears how cheated it feels, right? That Tulsidas's fate was not to rise up and gain this great faith to the point where fate actually feels cheated. And then he writes, your name, O Ram, is it wise or is it mad? See, and that's the question. You can never quite figure it out. Is doing Surya Namaskara wise or is it mad? Is this what I go through in my mind every day to focus and breathe and the anguish? Is it wise or is it mad? And then the whole predicating my life on this spiritual dimension. Is it wise or is it mad? And then he says, his conclusion is, it makes a weighty mountain from a tiny scrap of straw. A weighty mountain from a tiny scrap of straw. So cool. Okay, I'm almost done, but I want to give you a little bit more. Okay, and there's a poem from, God, I don't know who it's from, but I don't want it to stop me from reading it. I'm sorry. And if you, I don't know if I'm going to look it up, but it might be Lala. Okay, and here's what it says. I love this. Okay, she says, acquiring knowledge is like filling gold in a chest. And then here it is. The service bargain is to follow the path. Okay, the service bargain, this is the bargain you make, is to follow the path. And here it is. The agreement is not so much to test the truth. I love that. Okay, so the agreement is to follow the path. It's not so much, and you see, this is what we can get into this game. It's like we want to test the truth. We want to make sure that these things are good for us, that the God exists, and that I'm going to find out ultimately what's right and what's wrong, what's good and what's bad. And no. The agreement is not so much to test the truth. It's to follow the path. Okay, and I love this poem by Mira that kind of, to me, backs it up. Okay, I'm going to end with this one. So Mirabai, right? She was that lover of Krishna, a beautiful poetess. And she goes, Mother, tell me, why should I go on living without him? Meaning Krishna, her God, the self, the guest, the friend. And my heart, and so why shall I go on living without him? When I lost him, I did go mad. And my heart resembled a door eaten out by insects. My heart resembled a door eaten out by insects. The doctors could do nothing for me. And some absence inside me is eating me away. That longing, you see, this is faith. This is its own faith right here. She's telling it to us, right? And she goes, you know, a fish thrown on the bank does not go on breathing. It flaps its tail up and down and dies. Okay, and I go into the high trees and listen for the dark one's flute. I go into the high trees and listen. The dark one is Krishna, and he plays the flute. I listen for his flute, and then he says, my dear husband and Lord, find Mira now. Right? So the absence of answers, the absence of a connection is not a reason to doubt. It's its own form of devotion if you follow the path. So I leave you with just the idea that, to me, faith is the key to having a strong practice, and that is a struggle. Okay, and I'm speaking personally that it's something I have to actually remind myself of. That it's so hard how tricky it is to actually square on. Wow, I'm doubting. I'm having trouble here, and then finding a way to kind of turn my perspective so that I don't make weird failures. That I'm able to redirect my energies and listen better and feel my own person more plainly and more openly, more honestly, and then trust that wholesome, soulful, loving ways will emerge from me. You see, and this is what I wish for you, and what I have found keeps happening for me in my practice. And it's the kind of sincerity and the willingness to roll with the ups and downs that guarantees that. Oh, shoot. Sorry, I might have one more poem for you. I'm going to read it. I did get this one out, and I just want to see if it's still relevant. No, I think that's good for now. So anyway, I hope you enjoy this month's podcast, and I remind you about my practical practice talks, series of talks coming March 7th to May 9th, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can attend it live or watch the recording afterwards on your own time. And it's like the title says, trying to help you with the practicalities, like what to do with what when you're in pain. And I will give you the kind of list of strategies, and how to breathe better, and things like this. And you'll be able to write me during the week with your own questions pertaining to the particular talk. And I will try to incorporate what you are wondering about into my talk, so that you can get the best hookup in terms of get some really practical stuff to help you get on your mat, and then be skillful on your mat. Okay, so namaste, be well.